Hey folks, in this episode, it is all about the demystification of photography education online. This is TWiP. All right, so photography education online is the topic du jour of this week's TWiP, and this is a very special TWiP, guys, because normally, if you've been watching TWiP, there's usually me and maybe two other guests, sometimes one guest, sometimes two guests. Today we have three guests going on, and not only do we have three guests going on in this show, but we have three guests that know mountains more about this stuff than I do. So I'm basically just going to sit back and relax and ask a question every now and then and let these experts kind of talk through it. So let me introduce our panel of experts today. So we've got, let me bring everyone up here. Okay, here we go. So we've got Aaron Nace from Flern.com. Aaron, you started Flern, when was it? How long ago?
2011 is our actual date. So yeah, it's been.
Man. It was a different planet back then, 2011.
Yeah, out of my living room with a webcam.
And now it is a giant company. You've got from what Flern is kind of like that entity that I want to be, right? So you're shooting, not only are you shooting for commercial clients, I think, but you're also creating tutorials, obviously, for Flern.com and giving away free resources online and YouTube. So you've built a machine over there, which is pretty impressive. So congratulations on that.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it is a machine. I built this to get away from my job, and what I wound up doing is just building myself another job. So
rich dad, poor dad, right there.
Yeah, but at least if I don't like the guy in charge, you know
who to complain to, really.
Exactly.
All right. Well, also on the show is Mr. Chris McCaskill. Chris is the founder of a company called Cake. You can find him at cake.co. But Chris also is a co-founder of SmugMug, now SmugMug/Flickr. So Chris, amazing. Yeah, it is insanity. What is going on with the world, man? This is like, there's so much movement in this space. What's going on, Chris?
I don't know. I keep thinking I'll wake up and it won't be true, but they closed the deal. It's done.
They closed the deal. SmugMug owns Flickr. Like that. Yeah. We all grew up with Flickr. So that and then we I think a lot of us graduated to other services, including SmugMug, and to see it come full circle like that is really, really amazing, impressive. And like we were talking about in the green room a little bit, huge opportunity, huge challenge for SmugMug in terms of integration and bringing and doing the right thing. There's probably a million different ways that you guys could execute, bringing the Flickr people into the fold, but yeah. I hope you guys pick the right one because I need it.
Yeah. So when you say you guys, I full credit to my sons for buying it. Parents, fathers in particular, I understand, get annoying after a while. And we started SmugMug partly because I love photography, and Don and Ben and the others did too. But to help them achieve their dreams. And there comes a time when they want their hands firmly on the wheel. And so I went to do something else and get out of their way and be less annoying. And they went off and bought Flickr.
Yeah. But I'm gonna say none of that would have been possible without you. So so thank you for creating those extremely smart individuals that did that.
Thank you.
So, well, cool. And also on the show is my good friend, Mr. Photo Joseph. Joseph, I always want to call you by your full name, but I got it.
Don't even bother. No point.
Joseph Linaschke, a.k.a. Photo Joseph of photoapps.expert and a thriving YouTube channel and all kinds of stuff. What's going on, Joseph? What's going on in your world?
Oh, living the dream. Trying to build up that little that little YouTube channel into something special. It's getting there,
It is
working on it.
Yeah,
it's growing slowly but surely.
I saw your pick of the week in the notes. I want to. I'm excited to talk about that because, and I won't even give it away right now, but you have a very exciting and necessary pick of the week, so we'll talk all about that.
Excellent.
All right, guys. Well, thanks to all of you guys for coming on. It's like I said, it's an honor to have you all here. Before we get started with our topic du jour, I want to thank our sponsor for this episode, and that's our friends over at Format.com. They're offering a 1-month free trial, no credit card needed to try the service, and then after that, they'll knock off 25% off your subscription price to get into the service. You can try them at Format.com/TWiP, and we thank them for their support of This Week in Photo. All right, guys, let's dive in. So the main topic that I want to hit on, obviously, is photo education. And the main thing that I want to hit on around photo education, there's so many, I was thinking about this as I was kind of putting the show together, and there's so many different ways that you can approach this. But I want to approach it from two specific ways. One is, how do you figure out as a learner where I should and how I should be learning? Because as you all know, there are multiple ways that people can learn, or modalities of learning, whether it's reading or being taught or doing, or, it goes on and on and on. And then online, as evidenced by you guys, there are a million different resources online. Some are better than others. How do we sort through that? Aaron, Nace, I'm going to start with you, man. How do we sort through that as a learner to figure out where we want to go and what is the right tool for us in terms of learning and fine-tuning the genre that we're interested in?
I would say that everyone learns a little bit differently, and personally, I learn best by doing something. Just the experience of doing something, and messing up, something doesn't turn out the way you thought it was going to turn out, right, and then trying it again and figuring out why something works. So I think at its core, learning is done best, for me anyway, through experience. Now, online education is a little bit different, because I feel like that can kind of help to guide and inspire and maybe solve little questions that you may have here and there along the way, like, oh, I don't know how this tool works, or I don't know what this setting is on my camera. And I think that can definitely help you with some instruction and kind of help the journey. And I think back to the real learning that I've done in photography specifically, that's all been through experience. It's just been picking up the camera, getting out and shooting. And, so when I approach teaching, I try to approach okay, here's how you do this thing, but also I hope to inspire people to get out there and to do it and learn via experience.
Yeah, scar tissue, right? Yeah, scar tissue and repetition to learn more about what you're doing. But then, and I want to throw this out to all you guys, how do we... So learning the traditional way and doing like what Aaron said, where you go out and you give yourself a challenge and you make mistakes and you learn from those mistakes. When rinse, repeat, you get better and better. But each of you, feel free to jump in. Does it even matter these days? I'm playing devil's advocate in terms of the basics of photography, because cameras are so capable. Do you really need to know f-stops and shutter speeds and ISO? Do you need to understand the inverse square law in order to be a good photographer these days? Or can you just turn it on, put it on P, go get a photography book and say, hey, look at this shot that Photo Joseph did. I'm going to go do that and go do it. What do you guys think? Joseph, why don't you go first?
Sure. So there's the basic starting point where, yes, you can pick up any camera, put it in a fully automatic, and it will create a great image. Your exposure is going to be right. Focus is going to be right. That's easy. That's the easy part. The hard part is the creativity into making a compelling and an interesting image and understanding light and shadow and depth of the photo and all these other parts of it. And the nice thing is that the way it is today, it has raised the starting point. We no longer have to start with, well, now I have to learn what an f-stop is and ISO and all these things before I can even create an image, which made the barrier to entry much higher. Yeah. And it made it really hard for people to get started. But now anybody can get started. You can pull out your iPhone and create a great image without having to do anything at all. So while it does make it easier for people to get started, it also makes it harder for people to succeed and to be truly good, to really set themselves apart, because no longer is having a well-exposed in-focus photo anything special. Anybody can do that now. So now you really do have to push beyond that. So it does, in some ways, while it's harder to make a living, it's harder to be unique and different, it also makes it easier for those who are to really stand out, because they don't have to deal with the techie stuff to get their creative vision out. And once they get to, maybe a little farther along in the process, they go, okay, now I'm going to really learn some of the techie stuff, really learn some of this down deep, but I can get my creativity, my creative vision out there very, very easily. And that allows the artists to come through, which I think is really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And Chris, you and I have spoken offline, and I remember back at SmugMug a couple of years ago, you were explaining to me about this giant mural that you made from I think you shot it from Treasure Island of the San Francisco skyline, and you were explaining to me all the detail that went into it and the patience and this and and it ended up to be like what, I don't know, how many terabytes big?
I don't know, but it's 60 feet around the room. It wraps around 3 walls of a room. You've been there.
Wow.
Right, and it's so big.
The total width of the print is 60 feet.
And you could see the people in the windows. I mean, it's from Treasure Island. You could see people in the windows in San Francisco. And I was thinking when you were telling me about that, I was literally thinking the expertise that went into doing something like that is something that you probably couldn't just do by picking up a camera and, hey, let's stop by Treasure Island and take a photo. So how do you approach this stuff? From your standpoint, how do you approach learning?
So to me, it's project based. There's something I want to do, and in that case, it was this big pano, which took 23 attempts to go up there, by the way. And I slept over there, and I shot it at sunset, and I'd sleep in my car and shoot it at sunrise, and I tried all kinds of different things, and I kept getting blocked. And the people that I was renting some equipment from, Keeble and Shuckett at the time, said, a lot of pros have tried to shoot that shot and come away empty, and some pretty big name pros. It's a hard shot to make. There's all kinds of factors and everything else. So each time I'd get frustrated and I'd see that it wasn't what I wanted, I would go online and see if I could find something. And in that particular case, one of the things that was frustrating me was I was shooting it at the blue hour, and so the lights of the city were coming on, and they were very yellow, 2,800 degrees Kelvin. But it was the blue hour, so the sides of the building were like 10,000 degrees Kelvin, and I just didn't like the look of blue buildings and orange lights. And no matter how I set the white balance, it just was screwed up. I just couldn't make it look good.
Yeah.
So I went online and I found the tools from Tony Kuiper and the online learning from Sean Bagshaw. I saw Photo Joseph just did a video with Sean.
Sean lives in my town.
Yeah, and it was great. It was an advanced project. It was hard. It was luminosity masking, and it was just something I could not learn on my own, no matter how much I tried. And I've faced quite a few of those things where, I cannot figure that out. They had the actions that I could buy. I tried, thinking, I'm pretty good at photography and I've processed this enough. I tried listening to Sean, watching Sean in the gym of SmugMug while I was doing push-ups and sit-ups, and I'd stop and say, what the heck what are you talking about? And I have to back it up. And finally I just said, okay, I got to sit down and figure this out. But by the time I figured it out, it just transformed some of my photos, and I just never could have learned it on my own.
Yeah, yeah. And that's a good segue into just the idea of learning stuff on your own. Some people, like I was saying in the beginning, some people just can't learn on their own. Like Aaron, you were saying, just give yourself an assignment, go out, shoot, make mistakes. Some people go out and shoot, make mistakes, and then say, you know what, this is not for me. I'm going to go on to, some other hobby or profession. So what are the different ways of learning? Aaron, what do you think are the different ways that people, let me put a finer point on it, photography. We want to learn photography. Someone has, they got the bug, they got a camera for Christmas. Someone tells them, hey, you really have an eye for shooting portraits. You capture expressions really, really well. If they're at that point and they're like, oh, maybe I do have an eye and I'm tired of driving this Uber or working customer support. Maybe I should give this photography thing a go. What should they do? What are the next steps for that person?
Yeah, super good question. And I really agree with, Chris. I think photography is so broad that seeing it as like a project-based learning experience, I think that actually makes a lot of sense. Because, for instance, I've never tried to put a pano together like that, and maybe I never will. And I've focused on a totally different, side of photography. I enjoy, coming up with a concept and then bringing those elements together to try to create that, whether it's in the studio or, out on location. So I think, someone who's kind of getting out there for the first time and trying to make a big life transition, I would say, photography is one of those really cool, art forms. It's an art form. It's also super technical, but it fits really well with your existing passions and with your existing hobbies. And I think that, kind of understanding what your strengths are as a person, and also understanding what you're interested in and building photography around those things, I feel like is a really good key to success. You're going to enjoy photography if you mix it with your passions that you've had for a lifetime, or maybe it's a newfound passion. So, for me, I photograph people quite a bit because it's extremely difficult for me to try to get, realistic emotion from people, and also people, working with people gives me the opportunity to create like wonderful conceptual photos that, that basically I just see in my head sometimes and try to bring to life. So, that's why I was kind of drawn to doing that. But I think, if you're drawn to food, then there's food photography. If you're drawn to insects, macro photography, there's so many different things that you can mix photography with. I think that's a really great way to just kind of like get your start.
And one of the things I want to add on here is and I want to ask all of you guys this. Where do you draw the line between I'm a hobbyist and I'm just making pictures, I mean, all of you guys are professional photographers, so I'm not asking this to you directly, but like the John Q. Public, the person had just got their camera. Where do they draw the line at, hey, I just got this cool camera and I like taking pictures of X or flowers or this or whatever, and telling stories. We've been talking about that on This Week in Photo a lot. Do photographers, Joseph, and maybe you could take this first, do photographers have a responsibility, once you get a certain level of skill, to use that superpower that you have now to tell stories, and not so much to be a photojournalist, but not just take photos of flowers, maybe tell a story about how that particular flower became what it is or something. Does that matter? Like, does storytelling matter anymore, or is it all about aesthetics and making pretty pixels?
Well, that's two different questions. I mean, storytelling certainly matters, but whether it's responsibility of someone to do it, no, I'd say no. It's their responsibility is to do whatever they want. Mm-hmm. If they just want to make pretty pictures to hang on the wall that their friends and family go, ooh, that's a really nice picture, then power to them. That's it. If they want to make pictures that are pretty enough that people will buy and hang in their own homes, that's another level. If they want to make images that are good enough that companies are going to commission them and give them tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars to create something, then that's their passion, that's their level. I don't think there's any responsibility level in there, though. It's just what matters to them. In the world of art, most of us don't do art because we want to be rich. If people make a good living doing art, then that is awesome. But not too many people go into art because they think it's a way to make a really good living easily. Yeah. So you're doing it because you love it. You're doing it because you have to. You personally have to do this. This is your need. And if you can manage to make a living while doing that, then that's great. The only responsibility at that point is to yourself to ensure that you are making a living, you're supporting yourself and your family and whatever it is that your responsibilities are. But outside of that, just do what makes you feel good. And if what makes you feel good is creating images that you're never going to sell, and then you have your day job doing whatever it is that you do, great. That's your responsibility.
Yeah, I think that is true. But then part of the reality is people see that blood in the water, right? Take the wedding photography genre. People will say, hey, how much are we paying that wedding photographer? We got 10 grand, and let's do some quick math. If I was to go into wedding photography and I was going to charge 5 to 10 grand per wedding, I could spare one day every weekend, and back of the napkin, I'm well into the six figures. I'm going to go into that. So Chris, maybe you can add some logic to this, because you've worked with a lot of photographers. You've probably seen this kind of irrational exuberance about the business side of photography. How does a photographer make the leap from, like Joseph was saying, I'm taking pretty pictures just because I like taking pretty pictures, I'm getting pretty good at it and it makes me happy, to, I am johnqpublicphotographer.com, come hire me, here's my PayPal, and on from there. What do you say to those people?
So I've heard many wedding photographers tell how they sell those $10,000 weddings and sometimes $100,000 weddings and so on. And it's about the storytelling, not just of the photos, but of their life and what they do. And so, for example, one of them told me, several of them told me actually, the bride is looking for several things that she's not saying when she hires you. One is, are you going to look cool at the wedding? Are you going to make her look good in front of the guests? You're just like the decoration, the plates and the napkins and the venue and everything else. You have to be cool and not embarrass her in front of her guests. Are you trustworthy? Are you going to show up? And you have to be able to tell those stories. Plus, if you listen to somebody like Robert Evans, he would say it's the emotional moments. It's the bride who's buying the photo, or the mother or the groom. They're going to buy 80% of those, and they're going to go for emotion. The tears, you have to either capture that emotion or you have to draw it out, get them, to draw it out. So in that sense, a lot of it is about the storytelling and not the f-stop and the exposure. And I think those are just the table stakes. If you can take a pretty photo, well, that's step one in becoming a wedding photographer. But, sometimes I've seen wedding photographers show up at a coffee shop to sell, a wedding package, and they will say, I understand if you don't want to, if you choose someone else, you have choices and so on, but I do want to help you. And here's the phone number of the best person I know for flower arrangements, and here's the best cake baker I know. And it makes the wedding photographer feel good that they're doing something for the bride, which is great. But it's also engendering trust in the bride. It's part of the story that you're telling, that you're a trustworthy person. Yeah. So that's what I'd have to say about it.
But how do you get to that point, Chris? Where's that line of demarcation from I'm a beginner, I'm an amateur, I'm an advanced amateur, I'm a pro, and now I can charge for my work, and I'm able to charge for my work. When do they draw that line, or how do they make that determination? Is it even possible?
That's hard, and we unfortunately saw, we have millions of customers at SmugMug, and so we saw a lot of botched weddings, and it's the worst agony in the world, when the photos just aren't good. They weren't captured well. There was something terribly wrong with them, and they get the prints back and they're blaming SmugMug, and we have to have a photographer come in and try to rescue the photos the best that we can. So I always cringe to see the photographers make technical mistakes, and I always think first thing to do is go up to Flern or wherever you learn from, Creative Live or whatever. You got to figure out how to get the camera right. The exposure better be right. You better, better know basic composition and all that. You can't be going to a wedding like Uncle Joe and not getting it right. And then you're going to have to learn from someone. I haven't taken these classes on, how to capture great wedding photos, but I have talked to a lot of wedding photographers that were great, the Davises and so on. And I've always thought if you can just go take workshops from them, ask them all kinds of questions. I sent my daughter-in-law, Megan, who has a very successful, profitable photography practice. I sent her to the Davises workshops a couple of times, and be a second shooter, for somebody like Robert Evans, be a second shooter. And Robert's going to say, I'll try a lot of people as long as they've got the technical mastery down and they're not thinking about the numbers the whole time they're at the wedding, the f-stop and all that. That's just part of them. Once they've got that, I'll take a second shooter, but it's going to tell me what they see, because you capture what you see. And what I want them to capture is the emotional moments. Do they see that? Do they have the kind of empathy and all that? Because those are the stories that we want to tell, that the father he's got tears streaming down his cheeks. The daughter hasn't seen that from him in 15 years. Yeah. Because he gets to see her for the first time in her wedding dress. You better get that moment. That story has to be told.
Yeah. Yeah. It's what Cartier-Bresson said, right? It's the decisive moment, whether that decisive moment or is the tear coming down the cheek, and knowing how to get that. I think part of that education thing, like I was saying before, is internalizing and understanding your gear and the process of photography and the physics of light and what does what. Like you mentioned Robert Evans, Chris. Like Robert Evans is one of those people that can look at a scene. We were having lunch, I remember, one day in Los Angeles, and he's just like, we were just looking around, and he's like, oh yeah, that's 60th of a second at f2. You know?
I know. He knows those numbers.
He knows his numbers, and I would aim my camera up, and I'm like, yeah, it sure is. Like that comes from that level. Joseph, how long did it take you to get to that level? I know you're close to that as well. I mean, I think you and I probably both rely on the targeting computer more than the force, but you still know your stuff. I mean, you're a published photographer. How did you get to that level or what was the point of inflection?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I've been doing this for ever and ever. So, I don't generally try to make that point of look at a scene and guess the exposure and set it in manually. That's just not the way that I shoot or think. But knowing the equipment, whether you know the exposure just by looking at the sidewalk is not what's at stake. It's whether you know how to set the camera, to adjust the camera, to make the changes you need to get that image before it goes away.
Right.
And we talked in the beginning about these cameras that are super easy. You put it in full auto, you push the button, you get a great picture. But when that decisive moment comes up, those tears are streaming down the groom's face, or the father of the bride's face, and you suddenly realize that he's backlit and it's going to throw off the meter on your camera, and I don't know, maybe he's moving quickly or whatever it is, and you have to be able to think, okay, I need to compensate for that, I need to make that adjustment. And to be able to do that virtually instantly, that's what matters.
Yeah.
That's the technical aspect of it. And Aaron, I think you talked about how it's both technical and an art, and that is, for me personally, it's one of the things I love about photography is that it is both. I'm very techie. I'm a total tech geek, and having the tech in my hands as well as the ability to create art is a big part of it for me.
Yeah.
And so I love that. And if you're not a tech person, if you're not into the tech of it, and I don't mean tech for technology, but the tech of the camera, understanding the controls, the aperture, shutter speed, everything else, and light and so on, maybe it's not for you, because you really do need to know those things really, really well if you're going to try and shoot something like a wedding.
Yeah, I agree. Very well put. All right, so I want to switch gears a little bit with you guys, and these questions are targeted at you, Aaron, both you and Joseph. Both you guys run sites where you sell digital training. People can go there if they want to learn about X, Y, and Z. They can, punk down a couple bucks, and they've got training, and they can do the matrix and suck that knowledge into their head, and then go out and create awesome images. So, and one of the reasons why I wanted both of you guys on the show, all of you guys on the show, is to kind of talk candidly about making the choice. Like, when do I go? When do I start paying money for training versus just doing the needle in the haystack thing on YouTube and finding bits and pieces there? Aaron, why don't you go first? How do I make the choice to go from YouTube to, say, Phlearn?
Yeah, so it's a really good question. I mean, obviously, I learn so much on YouTube all the time. I'm always picking up new interests, and kind of the first place I go to is YouTube to learn about whatever, because it's just super easy for people to put videos out there. Now, when I find people who are putting out videos that kind of stand apart, the quality of the presentation is a little bit better. Maybe their lighting is a little bit better. They're using professional audio, video equipment. That's a part of it, but also the quality of the content. How quickly are they getting into what I actually want to learn? How are they wasting time with a bunch of fluff? Is there 2 minutes of information in a 20-minute video, or are they getting right to the point? And finding those presenters and those educators and those channels that really do kind of just do a great job of delivering information. When I find those people, they always stand out to me, and that's often when I'm ready to invest in their brand, because I know that they're doing their absolute best. They're putting their best work out there, and I know that I'm going to get consistent quality from this brand, from this individual, from this educator. I do yoga a decent bit, and I follow Yoga with Adrienne on YouTube. Mm-hmm. She's the best yoga instructor. She's better than, many of the in-person people I've worked with here in town. And, when it came time for her to offer a subscription platform, I subscribed because I appreciate what she's doing. I've already gained so much from her free audience. So part of it was I wanted to support her as a person, So that subscription fee was like, yeah, this is going to support someone who I really, appreciate. Perfect. And also I knew that the quality was going to be consistent and was going to be there. So, I think, for anyone learning, YouTube is a great starting place. And when you find someone who, just kind of like really hits home with you, for me, it's always a pretty natural progression to support that person further.
Yeah. Yeah. But then when do you move on? Like if you're on YouTube and you found that person that you want to support, and you gel with them and you like the way that they teach, but then you hit the wall with them. When do you go on to a Flern or to a Creative Live or Masterclass.com or Lynda or whatever? When do you go on to those services from the freeness that is YouTube or even the freemium that is YouTube?
Yeah, for sure. I think that, depends on what you want to learn and what you're trying to learn. With Flern, we've made hundreds and hundreds of free videos on YouTube. And for many, many people, that's going to be all they'll ever need. They won't need to take that next step further. But when people want to do more advanced Photoshop retouching or compositing or special effects work, or, they're getting into the conceptual side of things, or they want to take their skills to another level, I think that for our business model anyway, that's kind of how we position our own subscription service. Is like, we give you guys a ton of like really great free YouTube stuff. It's going to be great for most people. But when it comes time to like say, okay, I know the basics of photography, I know the basics of Photoshop and editing, I need to take my skills to the next level because I'm going to be doing this as a profession, or I'm just, very, enthused learner, or there's something specifically that I want to do. I want to learn advanced portrait retouching because I don't know how to do it. And we teach advanced portrait retouching, for instance, but to teach it well, we're talking about hours and hours of education. Yeah. And that's just, YouTube is not a great platform for that. So those people come to our website, they subscribe, they can watch all that stuff. It's included. And that's how we've kind of positioned our brand with both our free content and our paid content. Our paid content is basically just more advanced. It's more in depth. It's longer. You get more. You get to download all the raw files. You get, Like you get all the resources. It's sure. It's just kind of an additional bonus. Now, I can't speak to how other people, in the same space, basically provide their education. Creative Live's a little bit different because they offer it's the same exact product for free and paid. Basically, it's like it's a time thing. Yeah. You got to get it while it's live.
Yeah, watch it for free live or pay and watch at your own pace. Right.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think it's different for individual companies and different for their offerings, but we found great success in giving great education, that will help out most people for free. And then when those individuals are ready to take their education to a next level, maybe make the jump from amateur to professional, go basically this whole thing we were talking about, go from the step where, okay, I'm taking photos, people like them. I'm starting to get some questions about being hired, but I feel like my work needs to just, maybe my post-processing needs to get a little bit better. That's where we come in.
Yeah. Very good. Joseph, what about you, man? I mean, the same question. You run a site where you sell digital assets and training. Mm-hmm. Where do you think where should they draw? Obviously, everybody wants as much money as they can get, right? But you're talking to a friend and a friend is like, should I just marinate myself in all that is YouTube and learn that way? Or should I come to your site and plunk down a couple bucks and buy more focused training? What do you tell them?
Well, I think that the focus training is the big part of it. Like Aaron was saying, whether you're talking about Flern or Lynda.com or any of these other sites where you're paying for the content, or my own site, you're paying for a specific piece of knowledge that you want to learn. I want to learn, whether you're talking about, I want to learn Photoshop as a whole, or I want to learn portrait retouching, something very specific. I know what I want. I'm going to go in there, I'm going to find these lessons that are paid lessons, and the fact that this company has been doing this for a few years, they're still around, they're making this paid content, it must not suck because they're still in business, so I'll take a chance on them, give it a try, throw them a few bucks and see what happens, and you can learn that specific thing. Whereas if you just go to YouTube for the free content, which obviously I'm a YouTuber, I'm a huge supporter of YouTube, I love it, but it is very scattershot approach. You go on there and you search for portrait retouching, and you're going to find probably thousands of videos on there. But 1 out of 10 of them are actually worth watching. And, you can kind of go off of how many views it has, how many thumbs ups it has, that sort of thing. But at the end of the day, sometimes you don't want to spend half your time trying to find the education. You just want to go get educated.
Yep.
And that's where the paid resources are great. I know if on my own site, the stuff that you pay for is very much like Florin, is the longer format. I do short form stuff on YouTube. I do the daily live show. But then if you want to learn, say, Lightroom or Affinity Photo or some specific app, I'm not doing 5-minute lessons on there. I'm doing series of 20, 30, 40-minute long classes over just a single component, a single aspect of it. And so when you take it all together, it might be 5, 6, 7 hours of education on a single app. And that's something you pay for.
Yeah.
But when you just want those little tidbits here and there, then that's on YouTube and that's free.
Yeah, and what it sounds like, what both of you guys are saying is that it's time, right? I mean, we've always heard the cliche, time is money. So you're going to spend time either way. Either you're going to be spending it looking for that needle in the haystack on YouTube to find the right thing, or you're going to spend a little bit of money to not have to do all that and get the knowledge fast tracked into your brain. So yeah,
there is an irony in that, though, in that the stuff that's free on YouTube generally has to be short. And I have content on YouTube that's short and I have some that's long. And some of the long stuff, people just complain in the comments nonstop about, why is this so long? Why can't you just get to the point? So, well, I'm not just teaching you this one thing. I'm teaching the overarching story around it. But it's like, I don't care about that. I just want to know that one thing. But when you're paying for content, somehow it's okay to have it be longer. Well, I paid for this. I want to get my value. But that's almost backwards because, frankly, if I'm going to pay money, I just want to learn that one thing as quickly as possible. It's worth it to me to get through this as quickly as possible. But that is actually the opposite of how it's set up. Maybe that's a new business model. Maybe I should just, on my site, I go, here's 2-minute tips, and these are going to be information-packed, tightly edited tips, but you're going to pay like $10 a minute for this crap. Just because you think your time is worth money? Well, so is mine. So here we go. Yeah. But it's ironic because the stuff that's on YouTube that's free needs to be short, and the stuff that people will pay for tends to be longer.
Yeah, very interesting. Well, and this video that we're recording and streaming to YouTube right now is not short because it is, 37 minutes long already.
And it's packed with information.
It is packed with information. Chris, before we jump off this topic, I wanted to ask you a question, and this is a pointed question. So brace yourself, right? Okay. So, are photographers today, because of all the resources they have and the supercomputers and the advanced sensors they have in their Sony mirrorless cameras, are they better artists than they were, let's say, 15, 20 years ago? Because, for whatever reasons.
Wow, that's a hard question. I don't know. You do see spectacular images everywhere, and it's gotten so. There was a photo that I fell in love with from National Geographic. It's the big tall tree, the president, second largest tree in the world by mass. That was the one where you open the National Geographic issue and the tree tumbled out, unfolded 5 pages, and all that was shot by Nick Nicholson, who was there for 37 years by that time. And I just had to have it because I had a 150-inch high wall and I wanted to put it there. And so I begged National Geographic to license it to me so I could print it 150 inches high. And Nick, I remember I got talking and he said, everybody wants to be a National Geographic photographer. Everybody wants to do it. But it's not about the technical excellence, because what's happened with modern cameras that we couldn't even dream of before, and equipment and drones and everything else, is people can produce really pretty pictures now. There's so much online education. They can produce these beautiful photos. But very few of them can tell a story through their photos, and that's what makes the difference. You have to be able to do that to come to work for National Geographic. So if you ever get to SmugMug and you see that big print in all its glory, you can see the story emerge from it. He put 4 different guys up there, and they have forestry backgrounds and botany backgrounds and everything else. And that tree has a story about how the U.S. government called out the cavalry to protect it from what was a redwood rush at the time and so on. So I think I'm going to answer by saying I think they produce more spectacular and prettier photos than they ever have. And the equipment and the online training has really helped do that. I don't know, though. I just can't answer whether they can tell the stories the way some people can.
Yeah.
We'll probably get to this, but I was just having an email exchange with with Carol Guzzi the other day. She's won 4 Pulitzer Prizes for her photojournalism. She's the only journalist in the world to win 4 Pulitzer Prizes. Wow. There's 4 other Pulitzer Prize winners, but they're like Robert Frost for poetry and so on. And I was talking to her about what made her photos so great. And she said, everybody can take the photo. They can all do the artistic, and they can get the settings right and all that. It's telling the story. And I'd say, well, give me an example of what's a really good element of the story. And she says, innocence juxtaposed with tragedy. A little child being passed through a barbed wire fence to save it from the war, and the parents have to give it up to some other parents just for the sake of the child. That's a great story to tell.
Yeah.
And it's like, how many photographers do you know that can shoot in the modern era that can shoot like she can?
Right. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I just don't know the answer.
I think that, it comes full circle and it back to story, right? And storytelling, and, you can spray and pray all day long and generate 100 megapixel images, and fill up your memory card with all this beautiful data. But if there's no story there, then those kinds of stories, like you were just telling, Chris, they're not there. You just have a bunch of pretty pictures. So really, really interesting. So I want to remind the folks that are in the chat room, which seems like there's a party going on in there, the folks in the chat room, to get your questions in. Christopher Berry is collating those and putting them in our little Google Doc here that we're gonna jump into and answer right after this next segment. But let's move on, guys. So let's close off this whole topic of education. I want to give each of you a chance to respond to this. Aaron, we'll start with you. Any final thoughts that you would give people that are watching this, either now or in the future, and they're like, what, I'm confused. There's so much stuff out there for me to dive into. There's YouTube. There's all this stuff. Where do I start? I just want to get better. I just want to be the best photographer I can possibly be. Where should I start, Aaron Nace? And each of you guys get to answer this. So Aaron just took the first swipe at it.
Yeah, I got to come back to what I was saying earlier. I think, finding something that you're passionate about, finding something that you're going to enjoy doing, and getting out there and shooting, and having an idea of what you want to make. If you're just out there just taking pictures without really any goal or any purpose or any idea of what you actually want out of it, then there may not be much that's going to keep you hooked. But if you have something that you want to accomplish through your photography, whether it's monetary, whether it's personal, project-based, whether you just want to get a greater connection to humanity, if you have something that you want to accomplish, that is going to help guide your path. I think, in my experience, that's what's guided me the entire time. And then everything else I learned along the way was just in support of that. So I would say, set yourself a little goal of where you want to go with your photography. And then I think that, education is just a Google search away.
I love it. Love it. Very well said. All right, Joseph Linaschke, man, what about you? What do you think?
It comes down to learn by doing. That's what Aaron was saying earlier as well. You have to go out and do it. And so in this case, give yourself an assignment. If you don't know where to start, I want to get better at this camera thing, but I don't know what to do next. Give yourself an assignment. It doesn't have to be a complicated thing, but do something that you can do over and over again to get better and better. This is how we get good at something, is by doing it over and over and over again, and evaluating the results, trying to figure out what is wrong or what could be better, and improving. So whether that is portraits, I'm going to shoot a portrait a day and pick a new person every day to talk into sitting down for a portrait session, or it's nature photography. I want to go out and shoot flowers. I'm going to shoot a different flower every day. And if it's the middle of winter and there's no flowers out, go to the botanical gardens. Figure out a way to do what it is that you want to do, and keep doing it over and over and over again, and you'll get better and better at it. And also, I'd say don't let gear get in the way. It's so easy to say, oh, yeah, I'd love to do that kind of photography, but I don't have that lens. I need to buy that new camera before I can do that. And that's BS, right? If you got an iPhone in your pocket, you can create great images.
Just I got to say, it sounds slightly hypocritical with what's sitting to your right there on your table.
This was here for today's class.
Gear doesn't matter. Pay no attention to this bazillion dollars worth of stuff.
I'm not saying gear doesn't matter. Gear certainly does matter, but don't let the lack of gear stand in your way.
Yeah.
And you can create great images with whatever you've got and maximize the tool that you have. If you're just shooting with a smartphone or you've got one lens, use out of that lens, get the absolute most out of it. And when you've truly, truly exhausted the capabilities of that, and it's time to move on, you say, okay, I absolutely cannot achieve this. I want to get 6 inches away from my subject to do macro photography. I can't do that with this lens. Okay, then now it's maybe time for a little equipment change. But don't let the equipment stand in your way. Pick a topic, get out there, shoot the heck out of it, and get really good at that one thing, and then move on.
Yeah, perfect. Very well said. And Chris McCaskill, let me give you the last word on this topic. What do you think?
Yeah. So I'm a consumer of online training, and my advice is, at least this is my philosophy, you pay so much for the gear and you pay so much to get to the location, and the training is cheap by comparison to all the other things you do, taking workshops, whatever it may be, the time you spend on it and everything else. It's worth it to pay it. And some classes that I've found have just been transformative to me, and I'll give you an example. I found I was switching from Final Cut Pro years ago to Adobe Premiere. And it's a hard switch to make. I thought I knew Final Cut Pro really well, but then I'm sitting in front of Premiere saying, what the heck? Yep. So I looked around to try to find the best course I could, and Ashley Kennedy teaches one at lynda.com. Mm-hmm. Oh, my gosh. It was just so great. I wish she taught more classes. I looked around the other lynda.com classes, and they didn't do as much for me as that one did. And I followed Aaron and Photo Joseph's advice. I was project-based. I'm trying to make a movie. I'd get stuck, and then I'd go find that video where Ashley's talking about it, and I'd see that, and I'd say, I get it. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Then I'd go on and edit, and then I'd forget what she said and have to come back and look at it. Oh, that's right. And it was just a fantastic class. And this morning, I took one of Aaron's on blurring the background, which I face sometimes because I shoot with an iPhone, and I don't like the way the background necessarily looks, unblurred and so on. And it was a fantastic, I think it was 17 minutes or something like that. And in 17 minutes, so I think I understood the masking and the layers before that. It was interesting to see how he did it. But the gradient of the blurring the background so that the further away it gets, maybe I saw that once, but I forgot it all. Yeah. And so now I can take my iPhone photos where I don't have a f1.4 or 85 millimeter lens or something like that to make it shallow and make them look good.
Aaron Nace, look at you changing the world. Look at you.
I'm glad you watched the video and enjoyed it.
That one was free, but if it were pay, I would have paid. It's just
I will say, when it comes to online education, finding either a person or a resource that you really gel with, that makes sense to you, makes all the difference in the world. There are people that like the way that I teach and some that can't stand the way that I teach, and that's perfectly fine. Find somebody who you like to learn from and stick with that person, and you tend to kind of come along the whole ride with them. But you got to find that personality, that method of teaching that really works with you. Yep. I move quickly in my training, right? I move fast. And the number one complaint that I hear is that I go too fast. But that's a small percentage of people that are watching it. And the majority of people are perfectly fine with how fast that I move. And that's the way that I do it. Yeah. But if you don't like it that way, well, that's fine. I'm not going to slow down for those couple of percent of people that want me to slow down. There are plenty of other educators out there that'll do things more the way that you want it done. I just find somebody that you like and stick with them.
And to Aaron's point about you going fast, people that buy your training, a lot of them probably came to you through your YouTube channel, right?
Sure.
And your frenetic Doc Brown kind of methodology on stage there is what, if they go there and they're like, oh, I don't like, I'm expecting something different in his online training than he does in the YouTube channel, then it's their own fault, right? Yeah. It's their own fault. Well, cool. Well, thanks, guys. That was a really good conversation. Let's move on to this next segment is a segment I like to call the Picks of the Week. This is a segment where you guys get to pick something to recommend to the TWiP audience. It could be anything as long as it is somehow related to photography. Chris McCaskill, I'm going to let you go first, man. What is your pick of the week?
Oh, boy. I just can't get enough of Sigma lenses. I just love them. And they're tanks and they're heavy, and I shoot with a Nikon D850. I don't care that much about size. I'm not mountaineering or anything. And besides, if you're full frame, the lenses don't really get smaller anyway. So Sigma I heard rumors that Sigma was coming out with its 105 millimeter f1.4, and I love shallow depth of field, and then the rumor was confirmed, and now B&H Photo says my lens will ship in just a couple of weeks. So just
nice.
Nothing like a new lens showing up, is it? Yeah, I love it. Cool. All right.
It's like jewelry on my desk.
So this is the new Sigma Art 105 f1.4 lens, right?
Yeah, it's probably like carrying a 10-pound weight around, but I'm going to love it.
Hey, you'll get used to it. Well, cool. That was a good pick of the week. Thank you very much for that. Joseph Lanashki, what is your pick of the week?
Yes, sir. So Panasonic just released a series of updates for the GH5, GH5S, and G9, released actually this morning. Yep. And they are adding quite a few features as well as a significant autofocus improvement for the GH5, which is very, very welcome. And early tests are looking very, very good on it, which is exciting. But also just added a bunch of new features to it. And the great thing is it's all free. That's the killer part of it. You can download these firmware updates for free. It takes about a minute to install on your camera, and suddenly your camera is new again. Get a bunch of new features. And, 3 updates for 3 different cameras, G9, GH5, and GH5S.
Very cool. And plug yourself, man. You just did a live stream today that's online.
I did.
People can go.
I did. And that show is still uploading. It was so long, and I edited it a bunch and added a bunch of title cards to it. It's still uploading. It's crazy. But, I did a show this morning on my Photo Justice Photo Moment show. There was a complete deep dive through every new feature in there. The end result is about 45 minutes long, so it's going to be one of those long videos that people will complain about. But I did put timestamps in the beginning, so if you just want to learn how this one particular feature works or what this one update does, you'll be able to jump to it. So that'll be on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/PhotoJoseph, sometime this evening.
Very cool. Or tomorrow morning, probably more like it. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you for that. All right. And Aaron Nace, last but not least, what is your pick of the week, man?
My pick of the week is, so Adobe just announced a update to Adobe Camera Raw, which, for those of you guys who don't know, Adobe Camera Raw is the software it's inside of Lightroom, it's inside of Bridge, and it's inside of Photoshop. And it's basically how Adobe processes, raw photos. So if you're using Lightroom, it's using Adobe Camera Raw. In Photoshop, it's Adobe Camera Raw as well. So they just announced, an update pretty recently, which gives you the ability to add range masking to any local adjustment. It's super technical coming out of my mouth, obviously, but basically what you can do now is, let's say you wanted to edit the color of a sky. So you can take one of those adjustment brushes and just paint over the sky, and then you can click on a target color. So you can actually choose the blue and say only affect this blue, and now you can adjust like the saturation and the luminance of just the blue that you want in the sky. Or if someone's wearing a red dress, you can just paint over the center of the photo, target that red color, and adjust only that red color in the area that you paint. You can also adjust for luminance values, so light and dark, which is really, really huge. Let's say you want to do dodging and burning, for instance. Now you can dodge and burn within Camera Raw and restrict your dodging and burning to just highlights and shadows, which just adds like a huge level of basically of control through dodging and burning. And I found that with that level of control, you can get much more realistic results. So we just released an update on it on Flurn.com as a part of our Master Adobe Camera Raw tutorial. It's a huge update. I know it's one of those like weird hidden features, but once you kind of like see the possibilities of range masking, it honestly makes both Lightroom and Adobe Camera Raw quite a bit more powerful. So I'm excited about that update, and for anyone who hasn't checked it out, it's available in your adjustment brush, in your radial filter, and in your graduated filter. Just scroll all the way to the bottom of those menus, click on that range mask option, and just play around with it, because it really just expands the capability of those programs so much. And I'm really excited to be editing my raw files and to be able to choose color ranges or luminosity ranges to edit, because it really does make a big difference.
That is really cool. I think that feature is I'm not sure what the Adobe implementation of it is, but I know something similar to that is in Capture One, where you can select ranges and specifically target color ranges. I don't know how deep they go, and which one is better than the other, if at all. But yeah, that sounds like we've come a long way from just masks, right? just black and white gradient masks. We've come a long way from there. Well, cool guys. Thank you for those picks of the week. Those were excellent. All right, it is time for the Q&A. It's time to bring the guests or the chat into the show. We've got a lot of questions. I see Chris is feverishly typing into the Google Doc as I read this. But we're going to start with question number 1. This is from Stephen Schauf. And Stephen wants to know, he said, I'd like to hear how our panelists decide on what curricula they decide to provide education on. How do you guys decide what curricula to provide education on? Joseph, why don't you start? How do you pick your topics? What are you going to train on?
Well, so there's two different kind of channels, if you will. There's the Photo Joseph show, the YouTube show, and that's a different topic every day that I do a live show. And it could be user requests. I monitor the comments pretty closely. If someone has a good question that I think will turn into a good show topic, I'll grab that and turn it into a show topic. It might be a new feature like the firmware updates from today, or a new piece of gear, or it might just be something that I feel like, oh, this is a cool thing that I think people will appreciate, and I'll do a class on it. So it's very much all over the place. And I try not to make every show about gear, because I don't want people to always feel like, oh, well, he's just trying to get me to buy something. Certainly there's always gear to talk about, but I want to make sure I'm talking about technique as well. I'm talking about software updates and things like that. So it's really all over the map as far as for that show goes. But for the stuff that's on photoapps.expert, that is app-based, and there it will just be grabbing whatever the latest and greatest hot new app is that I can really do a deep dive on. Like right now I'm going through Pixelmator Pro. I'm just about finished with it, but that was updated not that long ago, but it was a pretty significant update. And so I really have just been taking the last couple of months to go through that one class a week and really diving into it. And of course, if you want to learn about Pixelmator, then that's great. You got a few weeks of solid education. If you don't, then, well, you're going to take a couple weeks off and come back to the show when I've got something you're more interested in.
Very cool. Aaron, what about you? How do you pick the topics you're going to teach on?
So in a variety of ways. First, I would say is things that I am personally really excited about.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say I discover a new technique, or I find myself I find a faster way of doing something that I've been doing for years, or a more efficient way. So that's kind of like the easiest one, right? I'm excited about this. I want to show everyone. Next is we do a lot of SEO research, honestly, and SEO, it sounds like super like boring, whatever, but what SEO is basically is like, this is what people are searching for. Like, this is what people want to know. This is what people want to learn. And so by analyzing keyword research, we find what people actually want to learn, and then we make tutorials based on what people are actually searching for. So it's not so much guesswork. We also do quite a bit of interaction with our community, and we just started doing some live broadcasts as well. So, the back and forth with them. Hey, did you like this? Did you like that? We got a really great response from a tutorial we did on masking and cutting subjects out of the backgrounds in Photoshop. So, that kind of spawned an entire mini series that we're doing right now with our subscription service on Flearn.com. It's one of the most popular things that we've ever done. And it's something that we wouldn't have created a few years ago, and it's totally spawned out of the response from our customers and from our users. So, yeah, I would say it's a number of different things that kind of dictate.
It's cool that it's database, that you look at the data and see what the trends on YouTube are, or in the search engines, and then basically pick from there, because you're, instead of reverse engineering and saying, hey, I need to figure out, what people are going to like, they're already telling you what they like, and you just build to feed the beast, right?
Exactly. Yeah, we have some pretty talented data people here, so they're, if it was just up to me, I'd be like, oh, let's do this cool thing, but they're like, all right, this makes a lot of sense, why don't we do this? And I'm like, you know what, you are right.
And somehow I don't think it goes like that. I think it goes like, you're probably like, I want to do this cool thing, or like, yeah, that's a great idea, Aaron. But you know what? I think first, let's do this. What do you think? These aren't the droids you're looking for, Aaron Nates. I love it. All right. So we got another question from Stephen Schauf. He says he'd like the panelists to speak on how the process of teaching helps them inform their own understanding and knowledge for their own photography and projects. Aaron, you want to continue your thought on that?
Yeah. And I got to say, teaching really is a great way to learn, because I think in order to teach well, you have to truly understand the material. And last month I made an in-depth tutorial on Adobe Camera Raw, and I knew I wanted to make the tutorial. I knew people were asking for it, but I personally felt like my Adobe Camera Raw skills were just kind of so-so. So I spent weeks doing a super deep dive into the program and learning everything that I possibly could, and then trying to reverse that to a place where I could teach it and teach it in a way that, you know, was as easy as possible to understand. You know, like, okay, here's all the tools, here's all the features, this is what you're actually going to do with them. And through that process, I found myself like, I've learned so much about Adobe Camera Raw, and now, you know, Adobe Camera Raw has been out for years and years and years, and I've never used it. And now I use it like a lot. I'm like into it. I won't say forget about Lightroom, because basically it's just doing the same thing, but I pretty much have stopped using Lightroom for my editing. I use Lightroom for my organization. They do the same thing. So it's not like Adobe Camera Raw is better in any reason. I just now I know it super well. So I use it quite a bit. And with the range masking and the adjustment brush, so basically all of my exposure adjustments, whether it's global or local, all of my color correction, skin color correction, all of it I do in RAW now. And it's really reduced the amount of work that I do in Photoshop, because I'm able to get so much done in Adobe Camera Raw. So that would not have happened had I not taught Adobe Camera Raw first. So by teaching it, it forced me to learn it a lot better, and now I feel like a more competent editor.
Yeah. Chris, do you have anything to add to that? Like when you're explaining things to people or teaching on various topics, do you find that you become a better student of that topic when you're teaching it?
Yeah, by far. It's just, you know, I wasn't a very good student, and I got expelled from UC Santa Barbara my freshman year.
That's awesome.
I had some learning issues. And then I heard a talk called Learning is Delightful by this professor of higher education when I tried college the second time. And he said, you know, to really understand something, you have to repeat it back in your own words. Yeah. And teaching it is probably the best. So he said, when you're reading a hard physics book or something like that, you read that paragraph, take out a pad of paper and write down what you just read in your understanding with your words, not memorizing their words. And so I started doing that, and it made all the difference. I actually graduated.
Wow. Yeah.
You know, absolutely. If you think you know a topic, try and teach that topic. Explain it to somebody else.
Oof. Yeah.
And that's when you realize how much you do or don't know. And you go, wait a second. Okay, I know what an aperture is, but as I'm trying to explain it to you, I'm going, hold on a second. I don't actually know why. Hold on. And it's it's a great way. And then you realize, oh, I don't know. You go learn it, you figure it out, and then you come back and you try and explain it again. Then you hit another stumbling block, and you go, okay, wait, hold on. I don't understand that aspect of it. Okay, let me go back and learn that. Yep. And whether you're writing an article or recording a video or just explaining it to a friend, you realize how little you know when you start to teach something. So absolutely, that's a huge way to do it.
Fantastic. Perfect. All right, Stephen Chow, thanks for those questions. All right, the next question up, we're going to take a couple more here. There's a ton in here. We're not going to be able to get to all of them, I don't think. The next one is from Uncle Inflammatory. Uncle Inflammatory. He says...
that sounds like people in my family.
He says, yes, and how to compensate for the limitations of tech without knowing. I'm not sure. That sounds like a fortune cookie, Unc.
I think I kind of interpret that to be, how do you know what you don't know? This is one of those challenges of anything in learning is, okay, I've got this camera and it's not creating the images that I want it to create. I need to know more, but I don't know what I don't know, right? And that's how I interpret that, at least. And I think that you really, if that is the question, it just comes down to pick out something. If you're talking about a camera specifically, okay, what does this button do? Mm-hmm. Do I know what this button does? Do I know what this dial setting is? No. Look it up in the manual. Read about it. Figure it out. Go, oh, okay, that's what it does. Yeah. Now, what does this next button do? And then at some point you go, well, wait a second. I learned this thing 2 weeks ago when I was going through it, and I just learned this other thing, and now I understand how those two things go together. And suddenly a light bulb goes off, and yes, now I figured this out. Now I understand, aperture versus shutter speed. Mm-hmm. But you may not realize that you have to understand aperture versus shutter speed. If you don't know that you have to know that, then how do you go out looking for that? But right. You learn about aperture one day, and then a month later you learn about shutter speed, and then the two come together. They go, oh, okay, now I get it. And I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah, very cool. All right.
I hope that's the question he was asking.
I hope so too, Hunk. Let us know if that wasn't. All right, the next question we're going to pull up is from the Post Color blog. He says, do you guys think wedding photography is the best way to do what Frederick was saying about making a career and quitting your day job? I've shot wedding video and I've done family portraits, but I'm not rich. LOL. Wedding photography. Is it the path to riches? Aaron, what do you think? Is that the...
You know, for me, the answer is no.
Come on.
Well, you know, so starting off, we don't really know what we're doing, right? So I knew that I enjoyed photography from just about the first moment that I actually started photography when I was traveling, and that's like when you're traveling, it's so easy to take great pictures, right? Because you're inspired by everything. You're taking pictures of like new things, and that's kind of what I fell in love with. And then I was trying to find my path as a photographer, and I saw people taking interesting street photos of people, you know, candid photos of people, and then. So I was like, okay, cool. I got to do that to be a good photographer. So I went out on the street and I started taking pictures of random people, and they just looked at me funny, and I felt like I was intruding on them, and I didn't like that feeling. I didn't. It felt like I was taking something without their permission. So, you know, that just guided my gut to say that's not the type of photographer I'm going to be. I can't do that. I shot a few weddings. And the day of was all right, but dealing with the clients and editing the images and all the back and forth, I didn't enjoy it. You know, it was that wasn't how I wanted to spend my time. And that made it pretty obvious that I wasn't going to be a wedding photographer. So, you know, I was able to eventually find what I enjoyed shooting, and that informed, you know, the rest of my photography career. So I would say that, you know, if you enjoy, and I have friends who really enjoy shooting weddings, and they make great wedding photographers, but I gotta think that, like, you gotta enjoy what you're doing. That's first and foremost, because you can be making a lot of money doing something that you hate, and, you know, eventually the money is not going to keep you in it. Yeah.
And I think you hit on a really good point there. A lot of really good points, but one of them is, you got to know when to hold them and know when to fold them, right? So you got to know when, and I'm speaking not about photography overall, but more specifically genres of photography. Try different genres. If one doesn't stick, that doesn't mean you suck at photography. That means maybe you should try a different kind of photography. You know, maybe you are not cut out to be, you know, shooting models and interacting, or maybe you're not, you know, cut out for landscapes. Try something else, you know, get back on the horse. So very good. Very good.
Yeah, don't get into wedding photography because you think it's easy money, because it certainly isn't. You can make an extremely good living as a wedding photographer if you are an extremely good wedding photographer, but you have to love it. Right. You have to love it. You mentioned the Davises earlier, and they're phenomenal, right? Bob Davis is a phenomenal wedding photographer, very high end, but he has such a passion for it. He loves that like nothing else. And I personally could never do that. That's not me. I've shot a few weddings. I enjoy it, but not to the level that he does. And that's why he's able to do what he does, because he absolutely, truly loves it. You got to love it.
Yep. All right, guys, I'm going to do something special on the show. We're going to take one more question. This one's from Through the Mind. But there are more questions for us to answer. But what I'm going to do for this episode, this is something that's never been done on Earth before. And I'm not even kidding. It's never been done on Earth. We're going to continue the discussion in a cake.co panel. So I'm going to invite all four of you guys to a panel on Chris's service where we can continue the discussion at our leisure. This is not you guys don't have to show up anywhere. You just answer the questions at your leisure. And we'll answer the rest of these questions, and we'll continue the discussion about online education, etc. Chris, before I take this last question, you want to explain a little bit about panels?
What a panel is.
Yeah, and maybe give us a little overview of what Cake is as well.
Yeah, so 17 years ago, I started this niche motorcycling site and called Adventure Rider, and it actually gave the idea to SmugMug, which was, we had this mantra, pics or it didn't happen. So if you're chronicling your ride to Mexico or Australia or something like that, write some text, show a photo, write some text, show a photo, but the forum software didn't host the photos well. So we built SmugMug to host the photos, and it led to pro photographers, and one thing led to another. And I always thought Adventure Writer would go away because it's old 90s-based forum software. But it's grown to about 2 million active users a month. And in the shadow of Facebook, how did that happen? Mm-hmm. And one of the things that happened is somebody wrote a Chrome plugin so that you could read these threads, ride reports, without having to see everybody else's comments. And we moderate it well. The other comments were things like, if you're in my village in Honduras, stop by for a beer, or, you know, hey, those are the same tires as on my motorcycle. But everybody wanted to hear from the OP, the original poster, the person who's doing the ride, because it's a noisy world, and that was less noise. So the problem was, if there were many people on the ride, you couldn't, the plugin wouldn't work because it only picked up the OP, not anybody else who made a comment. And then Facebook happened, and the election happened, and Twitter and social media, and I got to thinking, you know, the internet is the only venue on earth where there's an expectation that anybody can join the conversation. And it's the hardest venue on earth to have that, because who would have thought of Russian troll farms in St. Petersburg? Who would have thought of the billions of people who can join your conversation, and it only takes one person to wreck it? And so we've driven off a lot of the best conversationalists, Oprah, and, you know, they can't, you know, join your forum and start talking. But in the real world, we have an answer to this. You're practicing it right now. You have panels. You open it up to questions later. But the expectation of the audience is we all benefit if the panel can speak. So Oprah can be on the stage with Jimmy Kimmel at the Oscars, and even among that sea of strong personalities, they let the panel speak. And it scales. But the problem is, when you see one of those panels, you think, oh, you got to have an auditorium, you got to have a sound system and a stage and, you know, the whole thing, and people got to travel and pay tickets to get there and so on. What if we did the same thing online? It's one of these things hidden in plain sight. It reminds me of the Google guys noticing that, hey, the basis of SEO is how many people link to your website. Well, there were 23 search engines before that, and nobody saw that. It didn't take network PhDs at Stanford to see that. A sophomore in high school could have seen that, but none of us did. And it's the same with panels. When it comes to just written, posting written statements and photos together, why can't we have a panel of, say, the four of us and take questions, answer these questions that are coming online, and everybody lets the panelists speak? It's not for everyone, but it scales, you know, to millions and millions of users. Yeah. And this is how I made touch with Carol Guzzi. I've admired her photos forever, but she's shy and she doesn't really want to go on TV, and it's emotional for her to talk about the images that she shoots. She hides behind the camera when she's out in the field shooting these, and it provides an emotional shield, sort of like firefighters do when they hide behind their uniform and their trucks and so on, other emergency personnel. But then she comes home and she weeps at what she's seen, and she has to take time off. But in written form, and she can show her photos, and she can be protected from the misogynist. It's not easy to be a woman or a person of color, as you know, online, without, you know, people coming in and just, you know, tearing you apart.
Yep.
So, you know that better than I do. So panels are just a way to have great conversations online, just like you're having on your podcast, like CNN has, like conventions have, like WPPI and so on, where people can get on the stage and speak, and the audience lets them speak. So that's all it is.
That's cool. Yeah, that's cool. So we'll continue this discussion over there. So you guys, all three of you guys, will get invites to, I guess, Chris, is this one of the first panels since you guys rolled the feature out?
Well, we announced it yesterday morning.
So it better be.
And then we did an example panel of the Cake team. There's 9 of us. Mm-hmm. And so we talked about how we came to this. I came to it via Chrome plugin. Another engineer came to it via email list, because if you remember, that's the way email lists used to be. Just the people who subscribed to the list could post to the list, but the whole world could read it. It was a public archive.
Yeah.
So he came to it that way. And somebody else came to it through broadcast and so on. So they all talked about, why isn't this on the internet? Why isn't this a thing? It solves, you can imagine on Twitter, you know, it's such a broadcast format, like your senator will broadcast something on Twitter but never read the comments or engage with anybody because they can't.
Right.
And you can't get one of your senators to be in conversation with another senator. And we were hearing like from politicians who say, I can't have a town hall anymore. It's just doesn't matter what I say. There's just going to be people. It's going to show up on the camera that I tried to have a town hall and angry people showed up.
Yeah.
But what they can do is invite 25 of their constituents to a panel and have a reasonable conversation with their panel without having Russian bots coming in trying to divide us all.
Love it.
So,
love it. All right. Well, we'll test it out. We'll kick the tires starting tonight/tomorrow. All right, let's. I'm going to take two more questions, guys. This second to last question is from Through the Mind, and Through the Mind says, "Why on a podcast episode that downplayed gear and emphasized education were none of the picks of the week about furthering education, but instead were more gear based?"
Pick me.
That's a great question, Joseph. Why don't you take that
because I'm trying not to be totally self-serving, but now that you've opened up the opportunity, I am going to be self-serving. If you want my new pick of the week, forget the update for the camera. My new pick of the week is you got to come to India with me. Here, look, I even got a picture for you. Come to India with me. January 30th to February 9th of next year. I'm doing a photography workshop in India. photojoseph.com/India for all the infos, and this is going to be one insane, awesome workshop.
Yeah, I saw your sales page for that thing. I don't know how. I was trying to do the math, and I couldn't figure out how you were managing to charge so little for that, for so long and so far away. It's so that's pretty cool, man. Right.
It's going to be a great workshop, and the cornerstone of it is this thing called the Kumbh Mela, which is this gathering of it's only once every 12 years and every 6 years, so every half of that, there's the half Kumbh Mela, which is what this one is actually, where there will only be about 60 million people coming together. A full Kumbh Mela is 120 million expected. Mm-hmm. That's what there was last time, 5 years ago. So next year, about 60 million people coming together, one of those, the largest gathering of humanity on the earth, on the planet, and we will be there to photograph it. So it's definitely not something for the agoraphobic. You have to be willing to be around a lot of people and see some things that will just absolutely blow your mind. But it is going to be one incredible workshop.
Misanthropes need not apply, right? All right, Aaron, I'm going to give you a second chance, man. Since we're gonna say Chris's pick of the week was Cake's panel feature, so that is not gear related. So Aaron, you're on the hot seat, man. Joseph put his workshop in there. What do you got?
I'm going to second Joseph's workshop because I kind of want to go.
Bring that up on the screen again, Joseph.
Where can I find out more information? And have you been to? I've never been to India, and I've always wanted to go.
I have been to India a couple of times. Some of the places that we're going here are new to me. So what I'm actually going to be doing is this is being organized. All the logistics are being organized by a company there that does this for photographers. They organize photography tours custom tailored to what I want. And so assuming that this trip is a go, assuming I get it, I only need 4 people to make it happen. Our maximum workshop group is 8. So once that 4th person signs up, we tick the box that says this is happening. I will actually be going out there in November to get a tour of not only all these places, but in anticipation of future workshops, I'm going to be doing an 8-day tour of basically 8 cities. It's going to be an absolute whirlwind, but just so I can get my feet on the ground in each one of these locations. Because as the photography instructor, I don't want to go there and have never been there before, right? That doesn't feel right to me. So I'm going to have to spend that money to go out and do that, but that's fine. That's worth it to me to make it a better experience for my guests. Yeah. But you could plug something completely different. You could plug that one out of Chicago.
Oh, that's
there too.
Out of Chicago. That's right.
That's right. Yeah, sure. I'll plug out of Chicago. Just follow the link on Joseph's screen.
Joseph, put it back up there. I put you on the screen, man. Put it back on the screen. There you go. And for you folks that are listening to the audio podcast, head over to Joseph's website to find out about his India trip and outofchicago.com/summer for his to find out about the Out of Chicago talk that he's doing and get 50.
Yeah, and I don't know how many seats are left on that, but I know it is filling up. So if you're going to go, that's June. What was it? Let me bring that card back up again. It's June 22nd to 24th, so it's just around the corner. And you can get a $50 off coupon it's a $50 off discount with that if you use the code PhotoJoseph. So since Aaron, you didn't throw your code up, I'm using mine.
I didn't know I had a code.
Oh, good job.
Aaron's like, I don't need a code, man. I'm just.
But that is going to be it's a weekend long. It starts Friday evening, goes all day Saturday and Sunday workshop. There's a bunch of photographers. Aaron's there, I'm there, a bunch of other people are there teaching, and you have a series of classes that you sign up for to take, and it's going to be an incredible experience. Frankly,
Yeah,
I'm really excited to be teaching it. You taught it before, right? Frank?
I did. I had the opportunity to speak at one of the first ones. It was fantastic.
Cool.
Yeah, it's the unconference because it is. It doesn't feel like you're part of a cattle call herd being herded from room to room, and then they shuffle you off into the exhibit area to extract money from you, and then you go back and learn some more. It doesn't feel like that at all. It feels more like just a get together of people that are of like minds. That like.
Yeah, and there's only a few hundred slots, right? And there's 20 instructors or something like that. Yeah. And it's very intimate. I know in the evenings, we all hang out at the same bar together, come out, hang out, have dinner, have some drinks, hang out with your favorite photographer.
Right? Bar Louie. I think it's Bar
Yeah, that's right. Bar Louie.
Yeah,
there you go.
Louie.
That's the one.
All right, let's take the last question, then we'll shut this thing down. The last one is from Ruth Happel. Ruth says, do you feel in order to teach, you also need to take classes or other forms of online education yourself, or have you learned enough to be able to just educate without further education? Joseph, have you achieved cold fusion education?
Yes, I am one with education. I love to learn, right? And whether I'm learning by watching other videos or taking workshops, I have taken photography workshops from other photographers who do things that are completely different from what I do. Of course, you mentioned Sean Bagshaw. I've taken workshops with him before because I don't do landscape photography, but there's always something to learn. And obviously, everybody loves landscape photography. I mean, come on, who doesn't? So to take a few days to go out and learn from someone like him and to have that experience, it's fantastic, and it gets you out of your daily routine. It's a wonderful thing to do. So I highly encourage workshops, especially mine in India. I highly encourage workshops as a way to learn and to really step out of what you're used to, because it's a wonderful experience. And yeah, I absolutely do that. And I'm always watching other YouTube videos, trying to learn new things, listening to podcasts. Education never, ever stops.
Hey, one last zinger for you, Joseph. I'm going to put this on the screen. It's from Through the Mind. Through the Mind says he wants to go to your workshop, but he doesn't have a Panasonic.
That is perfectly okay. You can bring any camera you want. And if you really want to shoot a Panasonic, I'll loan you one of mine. How's that sound?
There you go.
I've got a few of them here. I'll let you have one.
Just bring all those along. Well, cool. Thanks, Ruth, for that question. Thanks, everyone who participated in the chat for the show. You guys really made this a fantastic show. Lots of firsts in the show. This was the first one of the new TWiP that I brought on 3 guests, and so far nothing's crashed and it worked flawlessly. I think the stream was okay. Let's close this thing down. Chris McCaskill, where should people go if they want to find out more about you and the stuff that you're working on and all that stuff?
So I'm SmugMug user number 2, cmac.smugmug.com.
Of course you are.
My son Don was the number 1. And so there's that. I have a pretty big Facebook presence with a big following. I'm one of those guys who can't extract himself from Facebook too well. And so there's that. And I'm on Medium too. I post a few things. Some people have said I have a crazy background that I didn't choose. I had a mentally ill mom, and I lived on the streets for years and missed most of elementary school, streets of Oakland. And I wrote about that a little bit on Medium. So,
you did?
In fact,
cool.
Yeah. In fact, I have a post. It'd be interesting to see how you react to this. It's called "Growing Up White in a Black Neighborhood."
We'll link to that definitely from this post. Yeah.
We have the @Cake Twitter handle. How do you get that when we just started Cake a couple of years ago? And the answer is, I asked the woman. You don't know unless you ask. I asked the woman who owned it if I could have it. She wasn't using it very much. She was a student at the University of Georgia. Wonderful young black lady. And she said, I'll think about it. And we all know what that means. And she said, I just want it to go to a good home and a good cause because it's a great handle. And I took the answer for what she gave it to be. And then I wrote that essay. And a few days later, she was following me on Medium. A few days later, she said, okay, you can have the Cake handle, which is very nice.
That's nice.
So and I don't think I had met white kids until I went to school in Orinda as an upper middle class white kid who didn't know how to deal with them in any way. It was 3 years of what the heck is going on here. Yeah, so all my friends were in Oakland. They were all black.
You wrote that. That needs to be the beginning of a book, hopefully. That's not just. It doesn't sound like just a Medium post. That sounds like a chapter in an overall a longer story. So,
yeah, that's the thing. Is you asked me a simple question, I give you a longer story. Sorry about that.
I love it. No, it's all good. It's all good. Well, cool. Aaron Nace, what about you? If people want to connect with you or learn more about Phlearn, where should they go?
Yeah, so we're actually doing a little promo for you guys. You can get 25% off a Phlearn Pro subscription. Just enter in the coupon code TWiP, TWiP. Yes. Yeah, and it's a great place to hang out. We are just started doing our live broadcast. We have some subscriber-only live broadcasts, which is super fun. So we get to interact with all the subscribers. They get to meet each other and kind of hang out. So it's an absolute blast. And yeah, I need to look into Medium too. It's been on the scene. Chris, are you enjoying? Do you still post on Medium?
Yeah, I love Medium. There's a fair amount of activation energy, to do it, and it's one of these sites where it's social blogging. So you have to write a pretty good post. You would write a good post, but it's kind of for people who are pretty good writers and they have something good to say. And if you do, you can get a pretty big audience there. We announce Cake there. And of course, people find me on Cake all the time, which is kind of in between Twitter and Medium. Yeah. Twitter's for really short broadcasts, and Medium is when you're really going to sit down and write something big, or somewhere in between.
Really cool.
Yeah, right on. Yeah, I started a little bit on my own blog, just on my own personal website, but Medium kind of sounds like a maybe just a little bit better of an outlet.
Yeah,
it's beautiful too. It's so well designed, just so pretty.
I love it. Yeah, it seems like software these days, especially online softwares, it's come a long way, in terms of the aesthetics and the less is more movement. Yeah, loving it. Joseph Lenashke, where should people go to connect with you and continue the conversation?
PhotoJoseph everywhere. YouTube.com/PhotoJoseph. PhotoJoseph on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, everywhere. It's always the same. PhotoJoseph, nice and easy.
Right. Genius branding. Whoever came up with that is a genius.
I don't know, Joseph, who came up with that? That is.
Do you know this story, Chris? Is that why you said that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I figured. Frederick is my personal genius. Thank you very much.
I don't know this story.
You got to tell it now. You got to tell it.
This was like 2009, I think. 2009 is when I left corporate and started up doing my own thing. And Frederick and I have been friends for a long time, and we're chatting just on Facebook or whatever, chatting to each other. And I was looking for a good brand name.
You were at my house in San Jose.
No, this was over text. This was
over text. Okay.
Yeah, this was over text. And I had my, so my last name, as you've heard, is Lenashke. So I have josephlenashke.com, which is obviously really, really easy to spell. So when I tell somebody that they should go to my website and I say josephlenashke.com, they're like, no. So clearly I needed something better than that. And I'd been trying to find a really good URL for a long time, and I'm chatting with Frederick one night, and he goes, oh, my God, photojoseph.com is available. Like, are you kidding me? It sounds a little bit cheesy, but heck, I'm going to grab it, right? So I grabbed that, and it took years to transition everything over. It took, Instagram, I think I grabbed Instagram right away, but Twitter, it took 5 or 6 years to get them to give it up. It was a dead account, and I finally got them to give it up. To reassign it to me. Facebook, I think I had that. There were a few other ones, and then YouTube was the last domino to fall, because I had just Jay Lenashke on YouTube, for 1,000 years ago, and finally got them to go in and change my official name on there to PhotoJoseph, which was not an easy thing to do, but I was able to do it. So now it's PhotoJoseph everywhere, and again, it's a little bit cheesy, but it's just kind of. I just own that now. That is what it is. And now I'm so used to it that it doesn't sound cheesy anymore. But if I really think about it too much, I go, it's kind of cheesy. But whatever. It is what it is, man.
That's fine. I like it.
And it's easy to remember and spell.
It is. It's easy. And it's got that alliteration too. So it's PhotoJo, boom, boom, boom. It's easy. It's easy to ingrain in your memory cells.
It is.
Very cool. Well, thank you, all three of you guys, for coming on. This has been a fantastic TWiP. I think I may make this a regular thing, having 3 people on. Adds a different dimension, a third dimension to the talk.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. All right, guys and listeners, thanks everyone in the chat room that were watching and participating there. I appreciate it. And if you're checking this out later, thank you for watching us on YouTube or subscribing to the podcast. If you're not subscribed to the podcast, head over to thisweekinphoto.com/subscribe. You can subscribe to the show, or you can find us on YouTube as well, youtube.com/thisweekinphoto. And subscribe and make sure you hit that bell so that you're notified when we do cool shows like this. And that's it. That's it for this episode of This Week in Photo. It is time to take that lens cap off. This is TWiP.